Recording. So anything you can think of can become a brush. Um, as you can see here, I've got some custom brushes here, and I've actually categorized them by making a fake brush that just says signatures, textures, and things like that. But literally anything you can capture with a marquee, either a round or rectangular marquee, and see it, it can become a brush. So here is an example of that. Had a photograph of an old globe, and I circled it and then asked it to become a new brush, and this is what happens when I use that brush. I'm just going to click down and not drag. So anything that is currently up in a Photoshop window can become a brush. Now, I'm not sure exactly how you'd use that, but I've used it in the past to create textures by just bringing up a texture, making a brush out of it, and then using it to brush with the Wacom tablet against metal or something to tarnish it, for instance. I can find another example. So really anything can be. Any brush that you create from an existing object, the best thing to do is to make the brush on a high-res document at the size you're going to use it, because if you try to enlarge one of those brushes that were made from an object, I'm using my bracket keys to make it large, it becomes kind of a soft edge brush. You can see how it's got a little bit of a ragged edge. So this brush is just a symbol, just a butterfly, and you can see that it's got some different settings here than normal brush would have. And I just want to quickly explain what they do. So the shape dynamics here is just going to control the tail, whether it's a brush has a tail or whether it's just a round brush. But scattering is the one that's causing these butterflies to be variable. You still have to set the control to pen pressure. And then you can see by changing scattering, it's either spreading whatever I'm painting out into the space, or it's containing it into a more brush-like stroke. So the more scattered it is, the more this will move around the page as I draw. The harder I press down. So I'm going to Command Z that. If I go really lightly, then they stay all grouped together. As I bear down, they start to fly apart. Not that you photographers are going to be making butterflies, but anything you can think of that could be used. So for instance, Ethan did something last year, and I think we were talking about putting a firefly around it. So he downloaded a firefly, we added it to his image, and then he wanted to do the trail of a firefly. And so we used this technique in order to get the trail to start really lit by the firefly's butt, and then get really soft and spread out like, almost like sparklers. And these other things like color dynamics, scattering, count, all these things change the behavior of the brush. And once you set them, that's the way that brush will behave. You can lock them down, but most people don't need to because they're not sharing their Photoshop with anyone else. The other thing is color dynamics. If you change color dynamics, this one here is set to pressure, and hue jitter will literally make whatever you're painting go around the color wheel as you press down. As I press down, it goes around the color wheel. If I barely press down, they stay pretty homogeneous. And then the more I press down, the darker they get. So that's just what the Wacom tablet can do in terms of making a brush act variably. But I'm not going to go too deeply into it because most people really don't use it in their photographic work, but it's there if you do. And I'm sure that there's a tutorial on it. I want to just go back to something I said, and that's making a copyright brush. I'm just going to delete all this stuff. So knowing that you can capture anything at all and make it a brush, you can also capture your signature or your name or anything you want to do as a watermark. So I have both written watermarks and I have also signature watermarks. I always change the colors to black or white when I'm going to make a brush. So if I was going to add a copyright symbol and my name to be used as a watermark, then all I do is do a type box on a high-res page, right? So this is a high-res 300 ppi 8.511. I'm just going to do Option G, which is copyright, and I probably would do it. Oops, I probably would do it all in caps actually. However this looks, whatever font it's in is exactly what your brush will put down in solid. So I'll change this to heavier weight, or maybe a medium weight. That's fine. For readability, you might want to track it out. Tracking is the space between characters, so I'm going to hit the character panel here and just ask for a little bit of tracking. Makes it a little bit more readable when it's a watermark. Hopefully this is recording everything with audio. So once you've got that brush, I'm just going to hit OK. So based on this being an 8.511 high-res image, this is the size of the watermark that this brush would make with the variables of a couple of clicks of the bracket tools. But to turn into a brush, it just has to be clear black on white, unless you're doing a negative brush and you could do white on black. But that brush would then lay down a colored square with your text dropped out. So unless you want to do that, stay with this method. And then you go to the rectangular marquee, selection marquee. You tightly put it around your brush like this so it captures every little bit of pixel that you put down. And then you go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and you can name it. Whoops, helps if I spell my own name right. And if you don't have to worry about how large it is because the brush already gets a pixel dimension added to it. If you say OK, that brush now lives in last place in your list of brushes. But now that they've added folders, you could actually make a whole folder full of brushes that are just your signatures at different sizes or different kinds. In this case, I'm just going to keep this. So I'm going to drop the selections with Command D, turn off the type layer, and get back onto this base layer. And whatever you last created is what your brush is set to right now. So that's the way the brush looks with my name on it. And if I click down, that's where it puts it. So if I was on a photograph, I'll just show you how I would use this in real time. Let me open up Tukey Williams again. So if I wanted to sign this piece, and I know I did down here, but I'll do it again. I'm just going to create a new layer, and I'm going to just stamp it right on his chest, but it's in black. If I want to flip it to white, I can either flip my color and do it again, or I can use Command I, which just inverts that whatever color is in that layer. You can also get to it up here, but it's kind of a long way to a short idea. I'm going to do Command I, and then you just lower the opacity and use it however you want. When I've been signing these photo illustrations in the past, I usually bury my name somewhere nearly invisibly, which gives me kind of the legal copyright on it and a bit of an artist's signature. But if you're doing a magazine cover or an advertising piece, they'll usually ask you to remove it. But my contracts that I exchange with my clients allow me to have my signature in all uses of my work. The only time it's not there is if I'm doing advertising for a product, and of course they don't want my name associated with it. I take it out, or I'll put it on a separate layer for the illustrator to decide, or the artist, whatever. So if you, I'm just going to go back to that other thing here. If If you want to vary the size of that once you've made a brush, then you can just use your bracket keys. But if you go up much larger, it starts to get a little bit soft. This one's not doing it because it's still pretty high res. So really you might only need a couple of different sizes of this brush. Usually what I'll do is I'll make a couple of different brush presets at different sizes, and that covers me for everything. Same thing with your signature. You can either sign your name with the Wacom tablet and create a brush with that, which means I have to switch to obviously a much tighter brush. I have a remarkably bad signature. No shame. So I actually drew my signature with a pen on paper and then took a shot of it with my phone, and that would be my brush. Rectangular marquee. Drag it over the brush, including my little dot there. Once again, going Edit, Define Brush Preset. I'm going to call it Signature, or it could be DJ Signature, doesn't matter. And that's the brush. I mean, one really obscure reason why that's handy to have is you can save a little JPEG of your brush or a little PNG or anything, and that way if you're ever signing a contract that's sent to you as a PDF, you can drop that right on the contract and not have to print it out, sign it, feed it back into your scanner. So you can access your brush file from within Acrobat and have it be your signature.